Welcome to the Strategy Sync YouTube channel. Please subscribe and like to hear new book summaries. We're diving deep today into a truly revolutionary book.
Yeah.
It's a book that really challenges the very foundation of how massive, complex projects get managed. It suggests that the traditional approach, the one that's dominated business and government for decades, is just fundamentally broken.
Completely broken.
And that the solution is this really counterintuitive operating model that's designed specifically for constant change.
It really is a necessary confrontation with reality, I think. I mean, the last few years have shown all of us that stability is just an illusion.
Right.
We've all lived through sheer chaos. You've got global supply chains just snapping, these persistent microchip shortages, and, that surreal image of a single enormous freighter the ever given getting jammed sideways in the Suez Canal. I mean, that one incident turned the world's most critical trading choke point into a massive parking lot. It delayed billions in trade.
It's incredible.
And when you're dealing with that level of systemic fragility, your old way of planning just fails. Instantly.
Yeah, if you needed any more proof that the old systems of rigid, long-term planning couldn't handle the modern world, the pandemic absolutely provided it.
Oh, for sure.
You just couldn't rely on some comprehensive plan that was written 18 months ago when the market, the regulations, the physical flow of goods, it was all changing on a weekly basis.
Exactly. And survival in this new, unpredictable environment, it didn't hinge on finding smarter people or suddenly demanding heroic, 80-hour work week.
Or just throwing more money at the problem.
Right, which is the historical standard corporate playbook for distress. No, it depended entirely on agility, on speed, and the ability to adapt instantly. So we are looking at a system called Scrum, which, while it's rooted in software engineering, the book powerfully argues is a universal human accelerant.
A universal human accelerant. I like that.
Yeah, it's an operating model that allowed companies not just to survive, but to solve these existential, seemingly impossible crises by radically changing how they organized and delivered value.
So our mission for you today is to really unpack this foundational shift. We're going to start with these spectacular, truly jaw-dropping failures that prove the old way is obsolete.
And there are some good ones.
Oh, yeah. Specifically, the FBI's Sentinel system disaster.
Yeah.
Then we will compare that with these radical success stories, like how a massive agricultural giant, John Deere, used this framework to stabilize its intricate global supply chain when everything else was seizing up.
Right.
We'll show you exactly how this new framework operates, the team structure, the metrics, and why, when you do it correctly, it leads to these often cited gains of being, 4 times faster and cheaper than the competition.
Yeah, and to really appreciate the solution, I think we have to first understand the high cost of the problem. So let's start with that spectacular breakdown of the old, rigid planning model.
Okay, let's unpack the sheer cost of clinging to the past.
Yeah.
Our case study here is the FBI's attempts to modernize its systems around the year 2010.
Right.
Now, by this time, you could buy anything on Amazon, you could instantly connect with anyone on Facebook, and search the entire digitized world on Google.
World had changed.
Completely.
Right.
And yet, the FBI was still relying on this outdated 1980s mainframe system called Automated Case Support, or ACS.
And it was a system that, it fundamentally crippled the organization's ability to conduct modern law enforcement. The book provides this incredible detail on the process.
Okay, walk us through it.
So imagine an FBI agent, maybe they're paying an informant or filing a report on some complex case. They wouldn't just input the data directly. No, they would draft the document, print out 3 copies.
3 copies.
And then manually, with a red pen, they would circle the keywords, the names, the financial figures that needed to be transferred into this antique ACS database.
A red pen? That sounds less like a high-tech intelligence agency and more like, a poorly funded municipal archive from the 1950s.
It does. And the consequences were anything but comical. The book explicitly links this rigidity and this inability to share information quickly to critical organizational blindness. The failure to connect the dots leading up to 9/11. Various field offices might have had individual pieces of suspicion, a questionable flight school student here, a name on a watch list there, but the bureaucratic structure and the literal inability to share information digitally created this massive barrier to achieving what the military calls speed of awareness.
So, okay, they recognize this catastrophic vulnerability the FBI decides to modernize. They hire a massive defense contractor, Lockheed Martin, to build the replacement system, Sentinel.
Right.
And given the stakes, the scale, and the budget, this really should have been a success story.
It became the quintessential government IT failure. The failure wasn't in the intent, it was in the execution method. By March of 2010, Lockheed had already spent $405 million.
Wow. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the annual budget for the entire state court system of Massachusetts.
That's a great comparison. And they were a year late, and independent assessments concluded they'd only delivered about half the functionality required.
Wait, $405 million already spent, and they were only halfway there. What was the projection for completion?
Well, the independent audit projected that the FBI would need another 6 to 8 years of work and at least $350 million more for Sentinel to be completed.
Good grief.
Yeah. The FBI realized that if they continued on this path, they wouldn't just be late and over budget. They were facing a total strategic failure that would last another decade and cost nearly $1 billion.
And the problem wasn't bad coding.
No, the failure was rooted in how they had contracted and managed the project. It was the traditional sequential approach known as the waterfall method.
So let's talk about that. The fundamental flaw of the waterfall method is this belief in the illusion of absolute control and predictability, right?
Exactly. You start with discovery, writing down every single requirement, then you move sequentially to design, then development, then testing, and then finally launch. Each phase has to be fully completed and documented before the next one can even begin.
And the physical artifact that promises this total control is the Gantt chart.
Ah, the Gantt chart.
They are beautiful, visually complex documents, color-coded bar graphs that meticulously lay out every task, dependency, milestone, and delivery date, projecting completion years into the future. They look incredibly impressive in a boardroom.
They are the centerpiece of the illusion. They were invented around 1910 by Henry Gantt, and their first major application was organizing the massive logistical efforts of World War I.
So you have to ask yourself.
Right. If we moved beyond trench warfare, why are we still using the planning artifact that organized it? The project managers at Lockheed working on Sentinel, they spent months compiling what the book describes as this beautiful, elegant fantasy.
But I've seen these charts. I mean, they seem logical, they manage dependencies. If the work is detailed enough, shouldn't they provide a reliable roadmap?
And that's the temptation. But the book argues, with really startling conviction, that these charts are always wrong the moment the plan meets reality.
Always.
Always. Every complex project involves discovering new problems, unexpected bursts of inspiration. It requires changes. The waterfall model, though, it's designed to be brittle. It resists change because any alteration breaks the entire sequence.
So if the plan is inherently faulty from the get-go, what happens next in these massive bureaucratic organizations?
This is the crazy part. Instead of adapting and scrapping the rigid plan, the organization hires people whose primary and often sole function is to update the Gantt chart daily, making the plan look like it's still on track.
So they're paying people to lie.
You are essentially paying highly educated individuals to lie to management and stakeholders. It creates what the book calls a complete mirage, where the internal reports bear no relation to the reality of the work being done.
That's a staggering indictment of a global business practice, that we are actively paying people to fabricate data. It sounds almost like a command economy, where the reported harvest numbers are divorced from what's actually in the fields.
It is precisely that. And the analogy the book draws is chilling. It mirrors the fabricated reports the Soviet Politburo was receiving about industrial output and agricultural success in the years just before the collapse of the USSR.
Wow.
The fabrication replaces the real work, and it guarantees catastrophe.
This reminds me of that famous observation from General Dwight D. Eisenhower. I think it perfectly encapsulates the difference between a rigid plan and the act of planning.
Oh, this is the perfect quote for this. Eisenhower said, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything."
Right.
You have to engage in the process of planning, understanding the components, the dependencies, the goals, because that intellectual exercise is valuable. But the specific rigid plan you create up front will inevitably fail the moment it encounters the real world.
So the waterfall method fails because it worships the static plan.
It worships the plan, and it tries to restrict the very thing that drives progress, which is change.
So when the FBI finally looked at that disaster, what was it, a 2-foot stack of requirement?
2-foot stack, yeah.
Yeah.
And the $405 million hole, they had to acknowledge that the only way forward was radical surgery. Jeff Johnson, the executive who took over, he didn't just tweak the plan.
Yo.
He had to spend months just unraveling the contracts and cutting that requirements list.
And they had, what, over 1,000 requirements?
They had 1,100 requirements, a mountain of documentation that no one could possibly internalize or verify.
So they had to scrap it.
They had to scrap that bureaucratic weight, bring development in-house, and cut the hundreds of contracted staff down to a core team of under 50 people who were empowered and trusted. They had to prioritize ruthlessly based on true value, not some contractual obligation.
But wait, isn't cutting 1,100 requirements inherently risky, especially for a security system? I mean, how do they know they didn't toss out the most critical security or audit features?
And that's the brilliance of the transition. See, they didn't rely on documents to tell them what was critical. They prioritized based on the new operating model's focus, delivering visible, working software. They asked agents and stakeholders, what is the most important, high-value feature you can use today? They moved away from asking for reports about the work and started asking for the actual working product. And this leads us directly to the antidote, the framework designed specifically to embrace change.
Okay, so we've established that the waterfall method leads to waste, often delivering nothing that the customer wants years too late. Now we introduce the solution, Scrum.
Right.
And the name alone kind of hints at a philosophy built on radical collaboration and unified purpose.
Yes, the term is borrowed directly from rugby. It refers to the method where the whole team packs together careful alignment, unity of purpose, and absolute clarity of goal to move the ball down the field against the opponent.
And this is designed to be the exact opposite of what we just talked about.
The exact opposite of the documentation-heavy, wasteful, and slow bureaucracy we saw at the FBI. It's relentlessly focused on empirical evidence and adaptation, delivering more high-quality stuff at a lower cost faster than was ever thought possible.
The truly fascinating claim in the book, though, is that Scrum is a universal human accelerant. It didn't just stay confined to software developers at Google or Apple. We're talking about massive physical industrial applications.
It's entirely domain agnostic, and you just have to think about the scope. BP and Shell use it for complex, high-risk, deep-sea drilling operations.
Wow.
Medtronic uses it for developing highly regulated medical devices. And in one of the most important high-speed efforts of the modern era, Moderna used it in the development of their mRNA vaccines during the global health crisis.
That's incredible.
So whether you are moving code, oil, or life-saving medicine, the underlying principles of organization and focus, they just hold true.
Why does it translate so well across such diverse sectors? What's the core insight that makes it so universal?
I think it's that traditional management seeks control and predictability, which necessitates all that documentation and those fixed plans. Scrum recognizes that every genuinely new project, from developing a new tractor model to finding a solution to a supply chain bottleneck, involves discovery.
If you knew exactly how to do it, you would have done it already.
Exactly. Since there is inherent uncertainty, you have to organize your work around the necessity of learning as fast as you possibly can.
Okay, so if the goal is rapid learning and adaptation, the central mechanism of Scrum, the sprint, must be designed to force that adaptation cycle. So how does this fixed iteration actually function?
So a sprint is a fixed-length cycle. It's a small, highly compressed work period, typically lasting 1 or 2 weeks. This fixed duration is a critical concept called a time box.
A time box.
The team commits to a specific sprint goal, a defined outcome for that fixed duration. And here is the key. No outside interference or changes are allowed once the time box begins.
And the product owner and stakeholders, they have to respect that boundary.
They must. It's non-negotiable.
Why is that rule so important, that absolute firewall against mid-sprint changes?
Because instability kills productivity. If the team knows the rules are changing every few days, they spend all their time replanning and context switching, and that leads to that mirror waste we'll talk about. The time box provides the necessary stability for the team to achieve flow and focus completely on delivery.
And what must they deliver at the end of every single sprint?
There has to be a finished increment of product, something working. It doesn't have to be the entire project, but it must be fully finished and usable.
So for the FBI's new system, this would mean demonstrably working software every 2 weeks that agents could actually log into.
Exactly. Or for John Deere, it meant a fixed, tested component of their supply chain solution. This working increment is then demonstrated to stakeholders and customers.
This sounds simple, but this rapid forced delivery cycle is the engine of the inspect and adapt methodology.
It is the engine. I mean, waterfall development often means spending a year building something that when you finally deliver it, the customer realizes they no longer need, or the market has moved on.
Right.
Scrum teams find out if they're wrong in 1 or 2 weeks. They get near real-time empirical feedback. Jeff Johnson, running the FBI cleanup, he found that these demonstrations or demos were the most powerful tool he had.
How so?
Because showing the actual working product, not a report about the product, to the director, the inspector general, and the agents themselves, it instantly cut through the fabricated reality of the old system. It built trust, and it forced honest adaptation.
This obsession with speed and rapid iteration, it has a compelling origin story in military strategy, specifically something called the OD loop.
Yes.
Let's talk about the fighter pilot who developed this concept.
The OD loop stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. It was the brainchild of Colonel John Boyd, a legendary U.S. Air Force fighter pilot who studied the air-to-air combat dynamics of the Korean War.
And he found a profound technological puzzle, didn't he?
He did. The Russian-made MiG-15 jet was superior on paper to the American F-86 Sabre. The MiG was faster, it had a higher service ceiling, a better thrust-to-weight ratio, yet the Sabre shot the MiGs down at an astonishing 10-to-1 kill ratio.
10-to-1. So this is where the specific design details come in, proving that superior technology can be defeated by a superior process. Why was the Sabre pilot winning?
Boyd determined the advantage wasn't raw speed, it was the speed of the pilot's decision cycle. The Sabre had 2 critical design features. First, a bubble canopy that gave the pilot this unparalleled 360-degree visibility.
Okay.
Second, fully hydraulic flight controls. In contrast, the MiG-15 had struts obstructing the pilot's vision and only hydraulically assisted controls, which made the jet physically taxing to maneuver.
So the American pilot could see the enemy first, and then, most crucially, they could initiate a maneuver and change their orientation far faster than the enemy.
Precisely. They got inside the enemy's decision loop. The MiG pilot would observe the Sabre's move, orient himself, decide on a counteraction, and begin to act.
But it was too late.
Before the MiG could even complete its action, the Sabre pilot, moving faster through his own ODA loop, had already observed the original response and launched a new counteraction. The MiG pilot was constantly responding to a world that no longer existed.
That's fascinating.
The key insight of Boyd was that the speed of adaptation, not the raw power of the machinery, dictated survival.
And that speed of iteration, the ability to cycle through, observe, orient, decide, act faster than the competition or the market chaos, that's exactly what the constant delivery of a working increment in Scrum achieves in business.
Exactly.
This aligns perfectly with the SBI's need for speed of awareness and John Deere's speed to execution.
It's Survival 101. As Boyd famously concluded, if you are in an equilibrium condition, if you are stable, predictable, and slow, you are dead. The name of the game in chaotic environments is constant, fast, deliberate change. Scrum forces that discipline of rapid, focused change.
Okay, so the framework provides the structure, but the structure only performs if you have an elite team executing it. And we need to spend some time here because the data on the difference between average and elite teams is frankly unbelievable.
It really is. The book cites a vast analysis of 3,800 different projects, ranging from high-stakes software development to complex financial system implementation, and the data is just horrifying for mediocre organizations.
Okay, lay it on us.
The performance gap between the best and worst teams was colossal. If the best team could accomplish a specific task in 1 week, the worst team took 2,000 weeks.
2,000. That is roughly 40 years. You're telling me there's a 2,000-to-1 difference in delivery speed.
That is the magnitude of the chasm between the elite and the abysmal. And this demonstrates why focusing solely on hiring a few individual superstars is just a losing strategy. The biggest competitive advantage an organization can cultivate is making all of its teams great.
And the book identifies 3 essential pillars that all super-performing teams share. Let's start with the first one, transcendence.
Pillar 1, transcendence, purpose.
So explain how finding a purpose greater than the individual drives this 2000x improvement.
Transcendence is the realization that the team's mission matters more than any individual member's comfort or ego. The classic, powerful example is drawn from West Point.
Right.
For over a century, the cadet company L2, nicknamed the Loose Deuce, was the absolute worst in the Corps of Cadets, particularly in the meticulous marching competitions.
The perpetual last-place finishers.
Yes. Yet by 1964, they had achieved such a state of excellence that they were chosen to march behind General Douglas MacArthur's caisson at his funeral.
How did the loose deuce achieve this total transformation? What changed?
They found a unified, transcendent purpose. It was rooted in the core motto, duty, honor, country. They internalized the meaning of serving a higher cause, which made the meticulous, repetitive, and often frustrating practice of drilling feel relevant and necessary.
So it wasn't about the marching itself.
No, it was about honoring the ideal they served. Purpose unlocked their potential in a way that simply practicing harder never could.
That's powerful proof that mindset and mission can overcome historical performance. What about the second pillar?
Pillar 2, autonomy, self-organization. This is the trust that's given to the teams to determine the how. Management sets the strategic goal, the what, but the team must have the freedom to decide the best path to action.
And there's a brilliant illustration of this from NPO's coverage of the Egyptian Tahrir Square revolution.
Yes, in 2011, that was a high-pressure, incredibly chaotic situation. The stakes were immediate and real.
Very real.
And when the revolution kicked off, the Egyptian government shut down the internet and the phone networks, which physically isolated the NPR team on the ground in Cairo from their Washington executives, who were prone to constant oversight and micromanagement.
So this enforced isolation became an unexpected gift.
An incredible gift. It forced true self-organization in the field. The senior producer, who was effectively acting as the facilitator or the Scrum master, implemented this incredibly simple structure for self-management.
What did they do?
They asked 3 questions daily. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And what is getting in your way?
And that last question, identifying impediments, is critical, right?
Absolutely critical. This autonomous structure, combined with the high-stakes purpose, allowed them to succeed and produce award-winning coverage where other journalists who were hampered by remote bureaucracy really struggled.
So it really illustrates that the manager's job flips from controller to impediment remover.
Precisely.
But if you have this autonomous, purposeful team, you need to ensure it has all the necessary tools. This brings us to the final pillar, cross-functionality.
Pillar 3, cross-functional skills and diversity. A great team must be structured to complete the entire project end-to-end. It has to possess every required skill from design and planning to testing and maintenance.
And the inefficiency of the past, like NASA's old phase gate process, was built on separating these functions.
Oh, completely. They had 6 separate groups responsible for requirements, design, development, integration, testing, and sign-off. And the handoff between these siloed groups is where work slows down and accountability dies.
Exponentially.
Yeah. Modern great teams avoid this separation, and furthermore, the necessary skills must be complemented by diversity in background, in thought, in experience. The research is conclusive. Diverse teams consistently produce better outcomes because they harbor different, often conflicting assumptions.
And that discomfort actually drives accuracy.
It forces deeper analysis and questioning. The book uses this fascinating ecological analogy to explain this resilience through diversity. The Puerto Rican coffee plantation and ecosystem.
Okay, tell us about the ants.
So in this unique environment, you have 3 dominant species: fire ants, big-headed ants, and little fire ants. They engage in what's called intransitive competition.
Meaning they don't have a single dominant leader?
Exactly. It's like an ant version of rock, paper, scissors. For example, the big-headed ants are superior climbers, and they can reach resources on coffee stalks that the fire ants just can't access. Because each species exploits resources the others can't touch, the overall ecosystem, the plantation, is far more resilient and effective than if any single species tried to dominate.
So diverse teams, even when they disagree, create a stronger, more effective whole.
That's the idea.
So we're building these powerful, autonomous, cross-functional teams. But the power of that team is severely limited if it's too large. How big is the optimal team size?
Well, the classic formulation from cognitive science is based on the limits of human communication. The optimal size is 7 people plus or minus 2 with a hard maximum of 9.
9.
And once you exceed that, velocity begins to slow dramatically.
Why does this ceiling exist? Why does adding more people to a team actually slow it down?
It's the sheer weight of communication overhead. The number of possible communication channels increases exponentially as you add members. So with 4 people, you have 6 channels. With 8, you have 28.
And with 16.
You have 120 potential links. The human brain simply cannot manage that many simultaneous relationships consciously. We can only hold about 4 distinct items in our working memory at once.
This brings us to a famous rule from software engineering that addresses exactly this problem of scale when urgency is high.
Yes, that is Brooks's law.
Which states?
Adding manpower to a late software project makes it later. This phenomenon is universal. If a project is late, the team is already struggling with complex communication. Throwing new people into that environment requires the existing team to stop work, to train them, to bring them up to speed.
Which just slows down the whole group.
Drastically. It often guarantees further delays.
So beyond size, managers have to be hyper-vigilant about waste, which the book calls a crime against society.
It's a strong phrase, but accurate.
And this leads us to Taiichi Ohno's crucial concepts from the Toyota production system, the triple waste.
Ohno identified 3 categories of waste that just kill flow. The first is MURI, unreasonableness. This is about setting goals that are absurdly impossible or demanding workloads that break human capacity.
Give us an example of MURI.
Well, think about the fly and die rowing strategy. A crew starts a race at a totally unsustainable pace, and they burn out before the finish line. In business, MURI is overworking people demanding endless 60 or 70-hour weeks.
Right.
The research is clear. The peak of genuine productivity often falls slightly less than the standard 40 hours a week. After about 50 hours, errors compound, fatigue sets in, and the extra hours you spend are actually counterproductive because they just generate more rework later. MURI guarantees burnout and errors.
Okay, the second one is MURA, inconsistency. This is the waste of flawed processes, and in the modern office, the biggest culprit is the illusion of multitasking.
MURA is the ghost in the machine of modern work. Multitasking or context switching is physically limited by the architecture of the brain. It leads to something called dual task interference.
What does that mean?
It means as soon as you interrupt an employee to start a second task, the time required for both tasks doubles. The book presents this terrifying calculation. Yeah. If a team is commonly attempting to work on 5 different projects simultaneously, which is painfully common in many organizations, 75% of their total effort is wasted.
75%.
Wasted in the cognitive load and necessary ramp-up time required just to switch contexts.
Wait, 75%. 3/4 of all effort is absorbed just by the mental friction of switching back and forth. That is an almost impossible amount of waste to absorb.
It is the single greatest efficiency killer in most organizations today. You're not doing 5 things slowly. You are essentially paying people to forget what they were doing, restart, refocus, and then repeat that cycle endlessly.
That's horrifying. Okay, so the third waste is muda, outcomes. This is tangible waste like excess inventory or work in process, things that are just half done.
Muda is often the easiest to spot. It's the waste generated from not doing the work right the first time. The cost of rework is critical here. The book highlights a study at Palm, the old PDA company, that measured the difference in time it took to fix software bugs based on when they were addressed.
I remember this study. Tell us the multiplier. How much more expensive is it to delay fixing a mistake?
The study found that fixing a bug took 24 times longer if it was addressed 3 weeks after it was created, compared to addressing it the day it was created.
24 times.
So if the immediate fix took 1 hour, the delayed fix took 24 hours. And this isn't just about code. This is true for physical products, accounting errors, process design flaws.
The lesson is simple and brutal.
Stop everything and fix the mistake immediately or pay an exponential cost later.
Okay, so we have small, waste-free teams focused on flow. But before the work goes into a sprint, we have to know what's most important. How do you decide what work is prioritized over everything else?
Prioritization has to be absolutely ruthless. It has to focus purely on what delivers the most value immediately. This is the product owner's core responsibility.
And most people suffer from what you might call importance inflation.
Exactly, the belief that everything must be done. But decades of data, particularly in software development, confirm the 80-20 rule. 80% of the customer or business value in any system is typically derived from just 20% of the features.
So the product owner's job is basically to ensure the team is always working on that vital 20% first.
Always. And to make sure that value is crystal clear, work can't just be described as a generic task. It has to be frames and stories. Humans process information and motivation through narratives, not bulleted lists.
And that's where the user story format comes in. So outline the structure of a perfect user story for us.
The required format is simple but powerful. As a whole, I want what so that why business value. The first 2 parts define the functionality, but that third part, the why, that's the non-negotiable component that defines true value and context.
We have a great fictional analogy for this, using Captain Picard of the Starship Enterprise. If Captain Picard requests a technical feature, why does the why matter so much to the team doing the work?
Okay, so imagine Picard tells the engineering team, I'd like the log function to automatically use today's start date.
Seems simple enough?
Right. The team, if they're left white context, might think this is a simple formatting request, maybe a complexity estimate of a 3 on their scale. But the product owner, knowing the why, can elaborate. If the why is simply to keep entries in chronological order, yeah, it's still a 3. But if the why is for unalterable, cryptographically secured audit functionality for Starfleet crime scene investigators, the complexity instantly jumps to a 13 or higher.
That's a massive difference. The context fundamentally changes the effort required.
Precisely. Without understanding the motivation and the business value, the team might resent being given what seems like simple, busy work. They might fail to build it robustly, or they could miss critical non-functional requirements like security or durability. Stories ensure context, drive motivation, and allow the team to accurately estimate the true effort based on the needed quality.
So if we're going to use these value-based stories to populate a sprint, we need to accurately estimate the effort required. But you keep emphasizing that humans are terrible at estimating in absolute terms, like hours, days, or weeks.
Oh, we are systematically flawed at absolute estimation. Ask someone how long it will take to write a report, and the answer will be unreliable. But we are surprisingly good at relative sizing.
Comparing one thing to another?
Yes. Comparing one unknown to another known quantity, we can reliably say, task A is twice as complex as task B, or that dachshund is definitely smaller than that Great Dane.
So Scrum teams estimate task size using the Fibonacci sequence, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on.
Yes. The Fibonacci sequence, where each number is the sum of the preceding two, is a geometric scale. It's found everywhere in nature. In the spirals of nautilus shells, the arrangement of seeds on a sunflower head, even the rotation of galaxies.
Why use this specific sequence? Why not just use a standard linear progression like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Because the linear progression is too subtle for reliable human judgment. The difference between a 5 and a 6 is it's negligible in the mind's eye when you're estimating complexity.
I see.
The differences in the Fibonacci sequence 5, then 8, then 13 are far enough apart that the human mind can reliably register a difference in effort or complexity. Using this sequence gives everyone a reliable, shared measuring stick for effort that respects the nonlinear way complexity actually scales.
And the technique used to apply this estimation is called planning poker.
Planning poker is a brilliant, blind technique. It's an application of the Delphi method designed specifically to circumvent cognitive biases.
Like what?
Well, if the lead engineer speaks first and says the task is an 8-month, everyone else's judgment is instantly warped by the anchoring bias. They will cluster their estimate near the 8, regardless of their true opinion.
So how does planning poker prevent these bandwagon or halo effects?
Everyone selects their effort estimate card simultaneously and lays it face down. Then they all flip the cards over together. If the estimates are tightly clustered, say a majority chose 5 and a minority chose 3, they'll average the number and move on.
But what happens when you have radical disagreement? Say someone chose a 2 and someone else chose a 13.
That discrepancy is gold. The rules state that only the person who chose the highest estimate and the person who chose the lowest estimate are allowed to speak. They explain their reasoning, forcing the team to confront their assumptions.
So the person who chose 13 might reveal a critical missing piece of security integration.
Exactly, that the 2 never considered. Or the 2 might reveal a piece of reusable code the 13 didn't know existed. This structured conflict quickly aligns the team's collective understanding, and they repeat the blind voting until a true consensus is reached.
And who, precisely, is allowed to estimate the work?
Only the people who are actually going to do the work. This is absolutely essential.
And we know this because
This was proven disastrously true in the GSI experiment, where they had the smartest guys in the room, all senior managers and executives, estimate 40 multi-million-dollar projects. That experiment failed completely because the estimators were so far removed from the ground-level reality. Teams have unique rhythms, legacy code, specific knowledge that no manager can possibly track. Only the doers know the true effort required.
Okay, so once we have estimated the work, completed the sprint, and delivered a working increment, how do we track progress? And, crucially, how do we reliably forecast future deliveries?
That's where the most important metric, velocity, comes in. Velocity is a measure of how fast a stable team is delivering estimated value. It's calculated by totaling the estimated points of the stories that were completed and brought to the definition of done in a sprint.
So this allows the product owner to accurately forecast the remaining work.
Exactly. If the FBI Sentinel team had 500 points left in their backlog and their average velocity was 100 points per sprint, they could reliably predict completion in 5 more sprints. This removes the guesswork and the Gantt chart fiction.
Right. Velocity provides objective accountability and predictability. But a team that's predictable and productive today has to also ensure it's improving tomorrow.
And that's the function of the sprint retrospective. This is where the team engages in continuous improvement, or what Deming called the plan-do-check-act cycle.
So in the retrospective, held at the end of every sprint, the team reflects honestly what went well, what went poorly.
And most importantly, they identify one single Kaizen, one small, measurable improvement that they commit to implementing in the very next sprint. That improvement is defined with acceptance criteria and placed into the sprint backlog, making it the most important task to execute.
This sounds like a soft cultural exercise, but you're making it a non-negotiable, prioritized piece of work.
Because if you don't dedicate time to improving how you work, you will never go faster. But to truly maximize long-term velocity, you need a different kind of metric entirely, the happiness metric.
Measuring happiness. That sounds like a vanity metric, something you measure after success to prove you did a good job. Why is this considered a necessary leading indicator?
Because the book argues, and the data supports, that happiness is a leading indicator of productivity, not a lagging result of it. If you see a team's reported happiness metric begin to decline, which is easily quantified through anonymous surveys, you know a problem is brewing.
A drop in happiness precedes a drop in productivity or velocity by weeks.
Exactly. Management can intervene and remove the perceived impediment before performance drops off a cliff.
And what are the core components that drive this critical happiness metric?
It's those 3 psychological needs that drive human satisfaction and productivity: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. People are happy when they control their destiny, autonomy, feel they're getting better at their craft, mastery, and are serving a cause greater than themselves, purpose.
And transparency is the key to that.
Transparency, making everything visible, including financial health and team metrics, is the essential prelude to achieving those 3 qualities.
We've established the process, the team structure, the metrics. Now, let's see. This framework tested against a genuine, existential global crisis. First up, John Deere. This is a massive, highly traditional industrial company whose products are essential for feeding the world.
And their complexity is just staggering. Think about the logistics. A single combine harvester requires over 10,000 distinct parts.
That's nearly twice the parts count of a new car.
It is. And when the pandemic hit in early 2020, every assumption underpinning their traditional bureaucratic supply chain management, long lead times, stable freight costs, reliable production schedules, was instantly invalidated.
The traditional waterfall planning approach would have dictated that they spend 6 months analyzing the problem, 3 months designing a new global structure, and then a year implementing it.
By which time the crisis would have already swallowed them. Precisely. Karen Powers and her supply chain solutions team, they recognized that their rigid bureaucratic process was now their greatest liability.
So they implemented Scrum.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And this forced agility allowed them to pivot away from fixed contracts and annual plans and instead focus on real-time data flow, identifying shortages, predicting bottlenecks, and implementing countermeasures to reroute shipments in a matter of days, not months.
So their success metric was the speed to execution we discussed earlier, proving they could react faster than the chaos itself.
It was decisive. While nearly every other major global manufacturer, from automotive to aerospace, faced assembly line shutdowns, John Deere's assembly lines kept running throughout the worst phases of the global disruption.
Incredible.
It demonstrated the power of the new operating model, the ability to successfully operate in any situation, regardless of external fear, uncertainty, or doubt.
Our second crisis case is Ministry of Supply, a clothing retailer specializing in high-tech office and dress clothes. When the world went into lockdown in March 2020, their entire market just evaporated overnight.
Oh, they faced immediate collapse. The co-founder watched their key metrics just fall off a cliff. Their customer base stopped wearing anything remotely resembling business attire.
As he said.
People weren't wearing belts and they weren't wearing brown shoes. For a high-tech apparel company, the industry average development cycle for a new product line is typically 12 to 18 months. They needed to pivot in weeks.
So they immediately restructured the entire company around the Scrum rhythm. They adopted 2-week sprints, alternating between a highly focused maker week for deep, uninterrupted work.
And an operate week for necessary meetings, planning, and sales.
And they made the radical decision to use this new agility not just for process, but for their actual product.
They chose to invest in inventory rather than liquidating the millions of dollars worth of slacks they already owned that were suddenly obsolete. They quickly gathered customer research, which showed two things. People were wearing sneakers constantly, and they were working from home, which meant they weren't tucking in their shirts.
So they took the obsolete inventory and retrofitted it based on that rapid feedback.
Yes. The team designed two simple alterations, adding a drawstring waistband to replace the need for a belt and altering the leg cut to better accommodate sneakers. This transformation, taking millions of dollars of physical inventory and transforming it from high-tech dress pants into high-tech casual wear, took just 10 days.
10 days. To achieve a massive product pivot that would typically take an apparel company 12 to 18 months. That's an incredible example of the ODA loop applied to physical goods.
It proves that Scrum isn't limited to digital assets. Its power lies in shortening the cycle between learning and acting, allowing a physical company to respond to a catastrophic market change with previously unimaginable speed.
So the principles are sound for small teams and for crisis pivots. But how do you take this framework and scale it across a massive established enterprise like Medco or the Royal Navy?
Scaling requires relentless focus on alignment and structure. Medco, the massive pharmacy benefit management company, provides a perfect blueprint. They started with the painful realization that their initial traditional IT plan was already over a year late.
So they introduced Scrum to one key division.
Right, and they started by eliminating waste, correct. They cut a massive 2-foot stack of paper requirements, the same kind of mutual waste the FBI encountered, and started focusing on short-term delivered value.
And the results were?
Astounding. The initial team boosted its velocity by over 400%, jumping from an average of 20 points to 90 points per sprint.
A fourfold increase in delivery speed is not a minor adjustment. It's a radical, undeniable improvement.
And that initial success was the crucial step. It built immediate, undeniable confidence across every department, from development to finance to clinical operations. That internal trust and empirical proof of concept enabled the eventual massive organizational restructuring they called Medco 2.0, taking the Scrum framework enterprise-wide.
We also see this in non-commercial environments, like the Royal Navy, a centuries-old bureaucracy which adopted Scrum to write its integrated review of security, defense, development, and foreign policy.
Right. General Gwyn Jenkins of the Royal Marines realized that while their personnel instinctively possessed an agile mindset during operations and crises, that natural speed was utterly crushed by day-to-day business bureaucracy.
Symbolized by, say, a 700-page travel policy.
Exactly. They had to restructure the bureaucracy itself to allow agility to flourish.
So what is the key insight for scaling agility effectively across hundreds or thousands of people?
Well, it comes from the lessons of the Apollo program. When George Mueller took over the Apollo mission at NASA, he was charged with accelerating a project that was perpetually behind schedule.
And he achieved a 3-year acceleration.
He did, by drastically flattening the management structure and, critically, by focusing on stable interfaces between empowered, innovating teams.
So the individual companies building the rocket parts, from the navigation computer to the engine nozzles, they were free to innovate radically on their own components.
Yes, provided the interface where their component connected to the next remained absolutely stable and rigidly defined. This is the essence of Scrum at scale. You empower stable, cross-functional teams to innovate independently and rapidly on their part of the solution, but you have to ensure the alignment, the shared enterprise backlog, and the defined interfaces are strictly maintained.
That prevents local optimization that undermines the larger whole.
That's it.
We have completed our deep dive into this revolutionary book. We've seen powerful evidence demonstrating the collapse of rigid planning, the FBI wasting nearly $500 million clinging to the waterfall method, and the radical success of agility, with John Deere operating successfully in the chaos of 2020 and Ministry of Supply transforming their product line in just 10 days.
Yeah.
The central message is clear. The path to greater productivity isn't about working harder, which only introduces myriad and error, but about working smarter, using simple fixed rules to unlock human potential.
So let's consolidate the 3 key takeaways you need to carry forward into your own organizational challenges. First, change or die.
Right.
Clinging to the illusion of rigid predictability is a guaranteed path to failure in a volatile world. You have to assume change is constant and build adaptation. That inspect and adapt cycle directly into your fundamental operating model.
Second, focus on flow.
Identify and ruthlessly eliminate waste in your system. This means eradicating MIRI, impossible workloads, halting MIRA, multitasking, which we now know wastes 75% of effort, and focusing on immediate fixes, knowing it is 24 times cheaper to fix a mistake the day it is created versus 3 weeks later.
And third, happiness is success.
Stop relying solely on output metrics. Cultivate autonomy, mastery, and purpose in your teams, and critically start measuring team happiness as a leading indicator. This metric is your early warning system. It will predict performance drops before they impact your velocity.
This journey has shown us that the most stubborn constraints we often accept, the glacial pace of corporate change, the cost of errors, the inefficiency of meetings, are usually the self-imposed hurdles of a broken, outdated system, not some immutable laws of business.
And you should remember the powerful closing analogy from the book. The future of work is not human versus machine, but human plus machine plus better process. The book states that in high-level competitive chess, 2 amateur players working collaboratively with standard laptops consistently defeated both the solitary best chess grandmaster and the solitary most powerful supercomputer alone.
Weak human plus machine plus better process was superior to the strong human plus machine plus inferior process.
Exactly.
So if adopting a few simple, fixed rules, like those in the Scrum framework, can make collaborative amateurs superior to isolated world-class experts with vastly superior computational power, what constraints are you accepting in your own work simply because they are the way things have always been done? It is time to question those sacred cows and start your own rapid iteration cycle.